Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Yoon Lee, Senior Director of EFM and a Program Owner of the Ascent 2.0. Now, we will look at the Project Portfolio Management Subledger, which we'll refer as a PPM throughout this presentation. And then we will review how PPM relates to the General Ledger. In the current state, the general ledger includes all the detailed financial transactions for the non-payroll expenses. But in the future state, most transactions will begin in the subledgers, which will contain subledger specific information, and then they will be recorded to the general ledger at a summary level, following what we call the subledger accounting rules. In this way, the GL, general ledger, will remain general at a higher level, and the more detailed information can be found in the subledger like PPM. With this structure, all contract and grant expenses will begin in the PPM subledger. Detailed transactions will be recorded in PPM using POETAF, which is a chart string that describes the PPM expenditure attributes. Then all these expenses in the PPM subledger will be recorded to the general ledger at a summary level, following the subledger accounting rules that I mentioned, and using the chart of accounts string in the general ledger. Next slide, please. And PPM subledger does more than just storing detailed contract and grant expenses. It brings the sponsor the award demographic information from the proposal and award tracking system, which we call PATS for those who are familiar with. And the PPM will also include the expenses approval workflow in the subledger. PPM will be also the source of reporting and invoicing, obviously because all the detailed contract and grant expenses are going to be in the PPM. So as we invoice the contract and grant expenses to the sponsor, PPM will also facilitate setting up accounts receivable for the billing amounts so that we can make sure that we follow up on the payments so that we can collect the payments from the sponsor. And the PPM will also provide the data, detailed level of the data for various custom reports that we will need to support the research community after go live. Next slide, please. So now let's take a look at the relationship between the current state full account unit, which we call FAU, and the new POETAF that will be used in the Oracle PPM in future. So as those who attended the previous town hall back in February may recall, POETAF stands for project number, organization, expenditure type, task, award, and the funding source. Many of these segments of the POETAF are mapped to one or more segments of the FAU in the current state. And this slide explains what segments in the FAU will determine the value in the POETAF. The Ascend program team will be able to derive most values for the POETAF from the current FAU values, except for the organization and the funding source, which are highlighted in peach color in this slide. For the organization, it will be mapped through the COA mapping effort that is currently going on, that Selena mentioned with the campus very actively. And then for the funding source, the project team will need the inputs from the campus departments, but then how we are going to collect this information will be shared a little bit later in the project timeline when we are ready. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the relationship between the segments of the FAU and the segments of the POETAF, which was described in the just previous slide, but using a real-world example transaction here. So as you can see, the project numbers in the POETAF will be derived by more than one segment in the FAU. In fact, actually 3 different segments there: account, cost center, and the fund. But then there is also a segment that can have a nice one-to-one match, like expenditure type. Expenditure type value will be derived by the object code in the FAU. So I'm hoping that this example can help to visualize the relationship between POETAF and then FAU a little bit better. Next slide, please. Next. In this slide, using the same example from the previous slide, it illustrates the relationship now between POETAF segments in the PPM subledger and the COA segments, which are in the general ledger. So for the first top two tables are exactly same as the one that we just went over in the previous slide, showing the relationship between FAU and POETAF. But then right below there, it shows that how POETAF are mapped to the COA in the general ledger. So for contract and grant expenses, the Ascend program team will be able to derive all the values in the COA segments, which are highlighted in light blue from the POETAF values. Even for those that are highlighted in peach color, which are financial unit and the program segment, the project team will be still able to derive these values as well, leveraging the campus COA mapping effort that is currently going on as well.